George Washington is one of the most well-known non-modern American presidents. Some notable accomplishments of his life were leading the American colonies to victory in the Revolutionary War, becoming the first U.S. president, and predicting the political turmoil we have today. He served 2 presidential terms from April 30th, 1789 to March 4th, 1797, and was the only president to be inaugurated outside of the months of March or January. Some notable accomplishments during his presidency include establishing the presidential cabinet. While the U.S. Constitution calls for the creation of various executive offices that answer to the president, Washington defined how these roles would function. The original 4 cabinet positions include the Secretary of State, ran by Thomas Jefferson, Secretary of the Treasury, ran by Alexander Hamilton, Secretary of War, ran by Henry Knox, and the Attorney General, ran by Edmund Randolph. Washington, while in power, set the precedent for how each of these offices should interact with the presidency. He also personally sought to include many differing political views in his cabinet, which is something most presidents decide not to follow. The next thing is that Washington personally led U.S. troops to stop the Whiskey Rebellion. Suffering under heavy debt left over from the American Revolution, Secretary of the Treasury Alexander Hamilton in January 1791 proposed to Congress an excise tax, quote, upon spirits distilled within the United States. This tax, which was passed in March that same year, wasn't popular amongst the American people. Frontier citizens relied heavily on distilled spirits for their income, and heavily opposed the new tax. By 1794, the Whiskey Rebellion threatened the stability of the United States with its increasing influence and violence. President Washington organized a militia of 13,000 men and led them towards the epicenter of the rebellion, warning locals, quote, not to abet, aid, or comfort the insurgents aforesaid, as they will answer the contrary to their peril. Washington also established the U.S. Navy. Washington happily passed the Naval Act of 1794, creating the U.S. Navy, and Congress would commission the first 6 U.S. ships in said Navy. The USS Constitution, the USS Chesapeake, the USS Constellation, the USS President, the USS United States, and the USS Congress. Now that we've gone over some accomplishments, let's talk about critiquing. No president is perfect, and it's good to know what makes these commonly worshipped figures human, just like the rest of us. Some notable critiques of George Washington include his complicated relationship with slavery. Like all rich Southern landowners, Washington owned many slaves and slowly became more in possession of them since the initial 10 he inherited from his father. As the Revolution was taking hold across the colonies, he became more uncomfortable with the thought of purchasing and owning other human beings. While he claimed to support abolition and the freedom of the slaves, he never practiced what he commonly preached. The majority of his wealth, and therefore his lifestyle, was heavily dependent on slave labor. However, when it came to his will, he detailed the freeing of the slaves after his wife's death. So, points for trying? Another critique of Washington is that he had the highest salary of every president. Washington had the highest salary of every president, so much so his salary was 2% of the national budget. So there's some information on George Washington, first president of the United States. I hope you've learned something with this video. I had a bunch of fun researching this, and learned a lot myself. All my sources will be in the description, as well as my script, which will have links to the sources at the very bottom of the document. Thank you all for watching.